Hey, alumni, welcome to InterVarsity World Changers, the podcast celebrating God's world-changing work in and through InterVarsity alumni like you. I'm your host, John Steele, and today we're talking with Smiley Abrams, a University of Southern Mississippi alumnus. And Smiley's changing the world through the Andy Abrams Foundation and its vision of a transformative discipleship house. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the episode. Smiley Abrams, welcome to the InterVarsity World Changers podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so glad that you're here. So excited to get to hear some stories about how God's inviting you to change the world with him I know that there's lots of ways that that's happening, lots of ways that we could talk about it, but in particular, excited to hear about the Andy Abrams Foundation. And Smiley, you are a multifaceted human being. There's so much more. You could give such a better introduction for yourself than I could. So I'm just gonna turn this over to you and help us get to know you, Smiley. What do we need to know about you?
I think I was just reading a book about that. It was like saying who are you if you're gonna write your headstone.
Oh man, okay, we're getting serious right off the bat. Here we go.
But no. So I mean, I in a short phrase, I would consider myself an inspirational speaker and a poet. So I am the, occupation-wise, the area ministry director for InterVarsity in the state of Mississippi. We call the area the Gulf and River, which it includes the state of Mississippi, Memphis, and West Florida. And I've been serving in that role for about almost 5 years. And then I also, and you mentioned the Andy Abrams Foundation. I founded a nonprofit called the Andy Abrams Foundation in honor of my father. I am a voice actor. My brother does some animations.
No way.
Yeah, so I do. I've been doing voice acting for over 20 years. I do a lot of voices for my brother. Thousands of videos. I mean, it's like a lot of videos. So thousands of hours of videos, movies, animations and things like that. But I'm an author of. I have 3 poetry books and one Bible study guide. So I self-publish all of my books. And there's a spoken word album that I have out with my poetry.
Okay.
So those are the things that I have. But I love cookies and I love Star Trek and Star Wars. That's who I am.
Wow. Okay. Well, you walk both sides of the fence on Star Trek and Star Wars.
Oh, yes.
Huh?
Oh, absolutely. I probably like Star Trek a little bit more, but just a little bit.
Wow, that's really interesting. I'd be interested to hear. We won't talk about this today, but I would be interested to hear your analysis on the consistency of Star Wars storytelling versus the consistency of Star Trek storytelling.
Okay, that's another podcast for another day.
Exactly. I'd just like to know what somebody who walks in both camps feels about those things. But yes, for another day.
So. Yep, I can geek out.
Fantastic.
There's another podcast I do with my brother about that, so we can talk. We geek out about that kind of stuff.
Okay, very nice. I'm glad to know that's out there. Maybe the question's already been answered for me then. Well, in addition to all of these things, Smiley, you are also an InterVarsity alumnus.
That's right.
Yes. Tell me just a little bit about Smiley's origin story with InterVarsity. How did that relationship kick off for you?
Yeah. So, when I graduated high school, I actually preached my first sermon the day before I graduated high school. And I it was the baccalaureate service. And I challenged all the high school graduates to find a college ministry when they go to college, including me. And so before I even stepped foot on campus, I knew I was going to be a part of a college ministry. And day one, I went to University of Southern Mississippi and I was looking for 2 things for college ministry. I was looking for something that I knew I was called to ministry, so I was looking for something that could help me to grow in my leadership. Okay. And then I was looking for something that was intentionally multi-ethnic. I grew up in a multi-ethnic church founded by Dr. Perkins. And so that's the environment that I grew up in. And so InterVarsity was that. It was like, this is a place that was intentionally multi-ethnic at Southern Miss, really the first InterVarsity, the first multi-ethnic group in the late 60s. The first multi-ethnic group in the 60s was InterVarsity at Southern Miss. Wow. So like that Southern Miss chapter was the first interracial group ever on that campus.
That's amazing.
And so I found that out later, but that was definitely like, okay, this is where I need to be. And so I got connected, started leading my first Bible study my second semester, freshman year, and was actively involved, the whole time, 4 years.
Okay. Wow. So gave this great commission to everybody, including yourself, and then immediately got connected with this chapter that has such a history of multi-ethnic fellowship, and that's really cool. I mean, a fantastic story in and of itself. But I mean, when you think about your years as a student with InterVarsity, is there like a specific memory that stands out to you of like, gosh, this feels like sort of the quintessential student with InterVarsity moment for me?
Oh man, so many. There's so many. I think that probably if I think about, there was a moment where I was leading a small group Bible study, and it was just one person, and I invited Heavy. And, I was hoping that more people would show up, but we're discussing things. And throughout the Bible study, I'm looking in the hall to see if new people were coming. And this person looked me in the face and said, "Who are you looking for? I'm right here."
Wow.
And that right there challenged me, because I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I'm so busy looking for the next person to show up. But and so my fellowship, I begin to focus really on you invite Heavy, but focus on who's in the room. And that's really what shaped my ministry. Wow. That was over 20 years ago, but that shaped, or about 20 years ago. And so that shaped what I do.
Wow.
And how I do it.
That's, first of all, that's an encouraging reminder to those of us who are tempted to cancel Bible study when only one other person shows up.
Yeah.
And what a great reminder of walking that line of ministering to those who are present while keeping an ear open or an eye open for who's missing, thoughtfully, who's missing that should be here, that we're either we're forgetting about, or whatever it might be, but not forgetting that there are people in the room right now who are ready to be discipled and to be encouraged with their walk with Jesus and in this community. And wow, that is a shaping experience for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a shape to who I am and how I do ministry. Absolutely.
I love that, man. I would love to hear more of those kinds of stories, but here we'll start advancing forward pretty significantly. Smiley, as well as me that in the culture of InterVarsity, we talk about lives transformed, campuses renewed, world changers developed. And here on this podcast, we would love to talk about any of those things, but we're going to lean into world changers developed. All right. This what does it mean for an alum like you to be a world changer? And so as we define what an InterVarsity world changer looks like, this is the way that we lay it out. There's two main components, and that's first, someone that's had a formative experience with InterVarsity. Anybody can be a world changer, but to be an InterVarsity world changer, it helps to have had a formative experience with InterVarsity.
Absolutely.
And then the second piece of those four loves that we talk about with InterVarsity as well, the growing in love for God, in love for his word, for his people of every ethnicity and culture, and in love with his purposes in the world. And so when we think about those things together, that's the foundation that we lay for what it looks like to talk about being an InterVarsity world changer. And Smiley, you are a world changer. God is using you to build his kingdom in the context that he has placed you in. So we've alluded to this already a little bit, but please, would you just give us a history here? What is the Andy Abrams Foundation, and where did it come from?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's weird as I equip people and tell people often that they are world changers. It's just definitely different to hear that someone says that about me. So,
well, it's true. It's true. Lest we forget, it's true.
So that's what my purpose. I really desire that. So when I became the area director, I want as an area director does hire more people. That's part of the idea is I think this is a great job, and part of the work of an area director is to have more staff to serve the ministry and serve the mission. And so, as I was thinking about how the Lord sustained me over time to be in ministry for so long. It was really one way was that I inherited a property from my family and I was able to rent that out and I was able to use that beyond the challenges of fund development, fundraising. And so I saw that and I was like, yeah, what if I was able to create something that could help other people that don't have inheritance and maybe create something that can build some resources to help sustain ministry. And that's really where the vision came about of doing a discipleship house, to have a house where that can bring the resources to ministry work. But then also I was able to live in community at the Spencer Perkins Center with the John Perkins Foundation for a few years. And I used that time to build a lot of the work at Jackson State. And that I saw the impact of how community living both could help students long-term, but also it built fellowship on campus. And so I'm like, you know what if I was able to do both at the same time? And so I ended up buying a property not too far from campus, which continues to still needs a whole new renovation completely. But when I bought the property, I began to pray over the space, and I was reminded of when I was a child. I grew up in the neighborhood. My dad was working with Voice of Calvary Ministries, which is the ministry that John Perkins founded, in the neighborhood, helping people to become first-time homeowners. I was around there every day. At 6 years old, my dad is helping people do this in the community, and I'm just observing it. So he passed away when I was 16, it's almost 21 years. And during that time, when I was a kid, I saw the impact that he made on lives. And of course, he made an impact on my life. He discipled me, poured a lot into me, and developed who I am as a leader. And so he never wrote a book, never published a book, never, wasn't a national speaker. And, most people won't know his name. But the impact that he made on me is transformational. And so part of the what I would desire to do is to honor him and his legacy that he made. And so I created a nonprofit in honor of him called the Andy Abrams Foundation. So that's his name, Andy Abrams.
Okay.
So it's after him. And me and my sister were thinking through ways to honor him well. And so that was part of what that was. And then the idea is that it's used to develop leaders and really taking a lot of the principles from what I do in InterVarsity and just moving it to another level beyond the campus level. And that's pretty much what the purpose of it is to help transition, not necessarily just transition, but helping, whether it's recent alum or seniors in college, to move to another level in their own leadership.
Wow. I love that this is built on watching your dad in these places and taking the skills that you've developed and learned on staff with InterVarsity and saying okay, here's an opening that the Lord has provided. I can take these skills, these things that I've developed, this vision that I've seen somebody that I really love and care for, and bring these things together in a new context, in a new way, and to help people move forward in taking these next steps in transition. I mean, as we talk about alumni work, that's huge for us, is talking about transition. So I love that that's part of the framework that you're thinking with that.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a beautiful vision. I love the idea here. So Smiley, let's talk about sort of in application, what has the process actually looked like as you've pursued this vision? Man. What are some of the things you've gone through to see this happen?
Yes. Oh man, that's a lot.
Okay. So let's do it. I'm excited.
Let's talk about it. So, I mean, the nonprofit came from I worked backwards because I had a vision for this house. I didn't really have a big vision for a nonprofit. I was just I really want to see a discipleship house. And when I purchased the property, I just bought it in my name. It was, I'm like, I will do this. Then people were wanting to support it. And so hey, they want to send money to help the process. And I'm just I understand the nonprofit world, being a part of a national nonprofit, being around nonprofit literally all of my life, so like my mentors are nonprofit, Dolphus Weary started his own nonprofit, worked in nonprofit. Like these are my mentors that I'm around. Got a certification in nonprofit management when I was in college. Wow. So like all that stuff is like there. And so it's like, okay, I guess I need to probably start a nonprofit because as people were sending the resource, like they were trying to send funds, I was like, wait, well, you can't send it to InterVarsity because it's, even though my purpose is to serve InterVarsity, it's not an InterVarsity property. So like legally you had to do something different. And so I was like, well, maybe I can create this nonprofit to actually support what we're doing in the house. And so the house still needs work. And so the vision, I bought the house in 2018. And the vision is like, okay, well, it just needs a little bit of renovation and then I'll be able to have people in it by, the end of the summer,
Right. No problem.
I wrote that out. I'm a visionary and I'm planning. I know how to plan in my mind 5-10 years. Like I can see stuff like that. Okay. And so, but like with this, I was like, oh, this should take longer than a year, but now I've never in my life done anything like this before. And so I had the vision, I casted it, shared it with everybody I know. And so it's like, this is what we're going to do. And people were excited. And then, I had a lot of help. Volunteers come through, churches, local churches, internet, like nationally, they come around, like, doing a lot of the demolition stuff, gutting everything out, got some video promos. And it was just a lot of momentum, right? In summer 2018, beginning of 2019, like all that stuff was going. And then I hit a brick wall. Like literally there's like, like the sledgehammers through the wall, like we had that. But then like just mentally, I didn't know what to do next. And so I had a few people that were, general contractor type folks that I knew a little bit about, got random estimates, and I still didn't know like what to do. Even if I had all the money, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have all the money, but I'm like, I don't even know what to do next. And so then, 2020 happens so it happened right before then. So I was like, I'm actually stuck. I was like, I don't even know what to do. And so even if someone gave me a check, I still wouldn't know my first step. And that's where I was. And that was, as a visionary, that was really challenging for me because I'm like, I don't know. And I know the end picture, but I don't know how to get there.
Do you think there's any chance that like you being a visionary, you say you can see 5-10 years down the road and like where to move in this direction? Do you think that you're not seeing that in this stage had anything to do with the Lord being like, listen, this pandemic's going to happen. So let's like just.
It's possible.
Like that he was just like, you will not be able to do anything here anyways.
Yeah, that is very, that's like the Lord is sovereign. He is sovereign. And so even thinking about a couple of things that allowed me to take my time and slow down, I was able to buy the house. Like I didn't have a debt on it. So like there was no debt on the property. I didn't make out any big loans to anything. So like all of the demo was volunteer labor. And so like 2020, even if I had it done, it would have been challenging, like getting people in the house, and I would have probably had I could have had a big debt.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Figuring out what to do. So like even like I never thought about it like that, but like God's sovereignty is real. And so like I hit the brick wall before, and then I'm like, okay, there was a big pause. The world paused, and I didn't set foot in the house for about a year. Wow. There was a squatter living there. And my neighbor, I did connect well, good Southern Mississippi. We get to know our neighbors. And so it's important.
Sitting on the front porch together.
Yep. So there's the neighbors, in the city for, 40 years. And so she's been in that community. So there's a neighbor to the right of the house that's been there. Then the house, the property to the left is a daycare center. It's actually a Christian daycare center. And then behind the house is the fence that borders the back of the house is a church. So that's what surrounds the house. So there's a church, daycare center, and then a neighbor that's very friendly, that's very well aware. So she was telling me there's a squatter in the house that I need to deal with it. So,
oh my gosh,
that was a lot. And so after about a year of not even being in the house, I was overwhelmed at what could be. And I'm like what had to happen. And I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. But after having to confront, and I mean, about me, I don't like confrontation. I just like,
Sure.
I was praying that everything would magically go away. Like that was, I was like, Lord, like just deal with it so I don't have to worry about it. And it's like,
Please,
then I
yes.
get a call. She's like, I just saw him walk in. You need to deal with this immediately because this is dangerous. If the house could burn down, it could be my property. Deal with this now. And I'm like, okay. So I set foot in the house, talked to the guy. He was actually very respectful because I saw he had like a tent up on the second floor and like a little area that he kind of carved out, like, like got out and was organized. Like he had a Bible in front of his tent. He had like his shoes lined up on the side. And so like he was there. He lived there.
Yeah, seriously. He's taking good care of the place.
And he told me that he felt safe and that was why he came there,
Oh, wow.
And so he was very respectful, but we ended up, trying to find him another place to get out. I'm not in the homeless business. Like I'm not an expert in that. I want to be friendly to the people that's around me, and so the unhoused. And so I just don't. But that's not my expertise. Like it's like
sure.
there's people that do it, and I like direct you to the people that know how to do that.
Absolutely.
I know my lane, and that's the thing I learned too.
There you go. And that's an important, I mean, even as we're thinking about like the things that God has called us into, like the work that he has given us to do, he's not called us to be experts in every area.
Right.
And so that like there is something to be said for where the places that you need to distinguish between something that's good and right and just and God honoring and people honoring.
Right.
And those same things, but they are what God has actually called you into.
Absolutely.
And where does it look like to say, there's a God and it's not me, and there are people that he has called into this.
Listen.
How can I empower them to do this well so that I'm freed up to do what God has invited me to do well?
Yes. And I was just thinking this yesterday that I'm so glad that I am not a superhero. Thinking about the way that I was watching different superhero movies, how the world the world is being destroyed, and they have to. There is their responsibility to make sure the world is not destroyed. And I was thinking about this yesterday. I was like, you know what? That's not my responsibility. Like, and it never will be. It will never be my responsibility to make sure the entire world is not destroyed. There is relief in that, and so even as I do ministry, I know that is not my responsibility to make sure the entire world is not destroyed.
Yes,
know my lane. I could direct him. So the guy, he ended up leaving. I'm not sure what happened to him, but he left, moved all his stuff, helped clean up some of the space too. Like it was very respectful. And at that point, I started getting a little bit more vision. And it was like, it's not as bad as I think, And so, so that happened. I connected with a couple of people that was helping me with just practical things overall. And one of the things I started asking the Lord for, and it was about summer, maybe a year and a half ago or so, I began to pray and ask the Lord, to give me wisdom. So all this stuff happened with during me confronting this squatter and dealing with a lot of that stuff, and renewed vision happened during my sabbatical from InterVarsity. So I was taking a 6-month sabbatical, and it was like I was just processing what to do next. And so this was still during the pandemic, 2021, spring 2021. It's like you couldn't do a lot anyway.
Yeah, right.
And so I'm like, all right. So things started moving a little bit slower. I mean, a little bit, like kept a little bit more pace, but, just slightly. And, but I asked the Lord for wisdom. I'm like, Lord, can I give me some wisdom on how to do this? Cause I don't know what to do. And even with the nonprofit, I had some board members on paper, but it wasn't really functional. And then just a lot of things. I'm like, how do I, make this happen? I do feel like I'm just owning this myself. And I know that I have exhausted, and that was the point. I've exhausted everything I could do on my own. And I'm pretty independent. I self-publish my books. I design them. Right. I format them. I write. If I can do it myself, I will do it. And I don't have to wait.
Indie to the max.
Exactly. And I know how to do a lot of things, some things, but this I do not know how to do. I, played around with trying to put some floor down. I've learned a little bit homeowner responsibilities, like that. Sure. But I can't renovate a property myself. I know my lane, and that's not it. So Lord, give me wisdom. And I remember praying for that. And then I end up, getting a couple of partners on the way. And there was one that was a potential, couple of banks that were potential lenders. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I can, because I know I needed more than what I had. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can get a renovation loan to finish this project. And so this is where still don't know all the steps I need, but I'm just like, well, this is something I know I need resources, like I said, right. And I got a guy that could probably help me get the renovation stuff done. So like, all right. And so during that time, I got 2 rejections from the banks, and I'm just like, man. And then the second rejection, it was where the bank, the CFO was talking with me, CEO was a person I knew, and they were like, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this happens. They went to the house, checked out the property, loved the vision. They were a Christian bank too. I was just like, oh man, this is like all like setting everything up. Like everything I need to make it happen, it was happening. And then like, I'm sharing with some of my mentors, like excited me, like, hey, this is where, keep us in prayer. We're moving forward. And then, they say, hey, we're not going to move forward with this, but we'll donate, $1,000 to your project. Now, the house, just to give you, for those listeners, like the house it's a 5,000 square foot property. Wow. So it was like a 4-plex. And so it is, and we're in the process of, we gutted everything out to the studs, took all the electrical, all the plumbing, all of that stuff is out. And so it just and it's got a good foundation. And so it just needs everything new. Okay. But it's going to be about 8 bedrooms, for student living, that space. And so it's a lot of work.
It's a big space.
It's a big space and a lot of work. So it's not like I can just, like a regular house. Like, oh yeah, I can just get it for my own house. Like it's not the same. It's like it's 4 houses. Sure. So take that. If you ever play Monopoly, right? Like 4 houses.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
You're about to swap that thing for a hotel, man.
That's pretty much what it is. And so it's like, This is a lot. And so after getting denied, I was really I was on the floor praying to the Lord, like, what do I do? Like, I'm doing what I know to do. Like, I don't know what else to do. And so I actually remember a couple of days before I get the rejection, I asked Dr. Perkins, I called him up one day. I was like, hey, like, how do you always think outside the box? Like, this is, he's been mentoring me, pouring into me for pretty much all my life. And I was just like, how do you think outside the box? Because this is, and he was in his 90s. He's in his 90s now. It's like always thinking outside the box. Like if you ever spend any time with him, he's like always having something new. And I was like, I need to think about something beyond what I can think about.
Right.
And he's always doing it to this day. And so I asked him that, and he was like, and it's so profound, so simple. He was like, Jesus has the answer to the impossible question. And I'm like, okay. And so he's like, look at Nicodemus. Nicodemus came to Jesus and he asked him an impossible question. And, John 3, he's like, how does a person be born again if he's already born? That is an impossible question, but Jesus has an answer to it. And if you look at and everything he does, it's an answer to the impossible. And he's like, it's so simple. The Bible is a source. It's a source. We think about our 4 loves, God's word. If you can love God's word, that is the source of anything that you think outside of yourself. The source is the scriptures.
Yes.
And so I'm reminded that after I get the rejection, I'm like, Lord, I need something. And so I'm flipping. I'm like, well, do I need to flip through the Bible, like randomly? I don't know if I ever did that. Like, Lord, you're sovereign. Yes. Help me find a scripture, and maybe that'll be something for me.
How do you think my high school devotions went, Smiley?
So it's like, find something that's relevant. But I really, as I was asking the Lord for wisdom, I thought about the story of Solomon. And I'm like, maybe a proverb could give me some wisdom. But I'm like, let me read about Solomon. Like, how did he get wisdom? And so I started reading that in Samuel, and got to the point where it said Solomon took him 7 years to complete the temple. And then I think it was like the end of chapter 6 or something like that. And then the next verse was like, and it took him 13 years to complete his palace. And those 2 verses, they're 2 different chapters, but they're in juxtaposition. And even in the story of how he built the temple, it's like he gathered different artisans and, different people from all over the region and gathered them. They rowed ships over the seas and, also a very detailed chapter that describes how. And I'm like, huh. And this is what the Lord's word for me was like, you think you're behind schedule. And that was I had a lot of shame, and I still struggle with that. Honestly, I still struggle with that because I'm a visionary, and it's to this day, the house is not done yet. But the word was, I think I'm behind schedule because I live in a world that wants things instantly.
Yes.
Like the microwave is too slow. And I actually like just a real reality. I stopped using the microwave during my sabbatical, and I haven't touched a microwave like to do any of my food since. And it's not that my food is eaten slower or faster. Like it's like the food is actually better. It's better quality, and it doesn't take as long as I think. That's the thing. It's like you think you speeding things up with the microwave with your instant mind, but the reality is you're not behind schedule. Take your time. Take your time. Enjoy the process. And Jesus said it, worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has its day to worry about. Like, see first the kingdom of God. Like, you don't have to worry about all these other things, Right. And that was the word of wisdom for me. Like, Lord was like, you know what? Like, allow the artisans, allow the pieces to come into place. Take your time, and do it right. And that's really where I've been at. I'm like, you know what? I'm not trying to rush into it. So whether the house is going to be done, next year or in another 5 years, I don't know, I hope it's not another 5 years, but I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, I think the vision is there. It's inviting people in. And so where we are now, during that time of asking the Lord for wisdom, and that happened, there were a couple of like different people that asked me questions of things I didn't know how to answer to, as far as the property, the house, the vision. And so like in that process, I developed a strategic plan. I did some like a monthly like training on nonprofit development. This is all outside of InterVarsity stuff. And then I ended up, revamping a board. And one of my goals for 2023 was to have a quarterly board meeting. And that has been done. Like, I was like, my goodness. Nice. At my last board meeting, I said, guys, we did 4 board meetings this year. And so and it's their quality. A couple of alumni from InterVarsity are a part of the board. So that's one awesome. That was a part of the group that I like, two alum that were a part of the fellowship that I started at, or that I developed at Jackson State. They are part of the board. They're married with a kid now, living. They might need to be on the podcast. Right. They're great alumni. You give me their number. Alumni. And then another is like in the 70s. I think she was, but she knew my dad. She was, came to Mississippi and poured into me. Been a great mentor of mine. But she was an alum at InterVarsity. I didn't know about this till I started working for InterVarsity. But she was a part of InterVarsity, but I knew her when I was 3. So that's amazing. So yeah, so she's a part of the board as well. And so it was a high quality, just in that process, strategic plan has been developed. We started focusing not just on, because what I realized is that the nonprofit, one aspect of the nonprofit is the discipleship house. Okay. But there's more. So just being able to develop leaders is the key focus. And so we can do a little bit more than, once the house is done, this is a platform that we can use it. But even before the house is done, we're going to be doing different things. So we're talking about doing a retreat for leadership development. And this is different. It's I'm so InterVarsity, so it's hard to not, I'm as InterVarsity as you're gonna get. Sure. So it's a lot of what I do is incorporated a lot of that, but it's That's outside awesome. Of that. So it's this is developing leaders outside of that. So yeah, where I'm at right now, that's where that's where we are. So we have that, a solid board. I got an architect that's finishing up my plans for the renovation. And we're going to get some general contractor bids soon to get a clear estimate on the process of renovation. And once I have that, then I'll know exactly what I need. Because that's the big question right now. It's I actually don't know the answer to that. How much do you need? I don't know that yet. Of course, renovation projects can be different based on prices of, lumber and all that stuff. But yeah. So that's a little bit about where we are.
Wow, so man, what a journey that you have been on, and that's not done yet. That's what's interesting to me is that even as we talk right now, you have these moments of success that you've hit. Of we set this goal of quarterly board meetings and we hit it. Yes, and I've gotten some of these trainings and I'm learning all of these different things, but and we're learning like, hey, here are places where the house aspect is one part, but there are
Right.
other things that we can focus in on and that we can make some more progress on. So there's like fits and starts. There's places where you're seeing progress. There's places where you're like, we're still in the same place that we were a year ago.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so when you come across those kinds of things, like, how do you keep saying yes to Jesus and this partnership through all of those roadblocks?
Man, I said it earlier, but I really do believe in the sovereignty of God. That's been, and any student, tell them that's my answer to a lot of questions.
Nice.
And so it is something that, and I can rest in the sovereignty of God because the fact that I know that I'm not the one controlling this, and there's things that I don't know about that I know that God is over and beyond my understanding. And so I think that's how I can say yes. I mean, I know that, like, I look at how God has provided for me. And I was, even yesterday at church, we were looking at Psalm 23, and it's like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Like, the reality that I have all that I need and want. Like, that is true. And so, like, I can keep saying yes to Jesus just because he has everything. He is everything, and in Philippians 4, like, like, the God of peace will be with me, and I will have access to peace, the peace of God. Like, that's just amazing to think about. I can have access to the peace of God in a world that's broken.
Yes.
And the God of peace is next to me in a world that's broken. And I think that, that as I think about, that's honestly why I like the name Smiley. I tell people that God changed my name to Smiley. And it's part of that story of, like, I mentioned that my dad passed away, but he dealt with a lot of sickness before. And so before he died, and I saw that peace of God and the God of peace with him in the midst of that. And when I saw that, that's where I fell in love with Jesus. And I started expressing it by wearing smiley face stuff, and that people started calling me Smiley. That's really what it was.
Nice.
But it was a joy that I have in my heart that's unconditional, that fruit of the Spirit that's in my heart that I have unconditionally, that I can have peace. So I follow Jesus, the Prince of Peace. So.
Yes. And that's, as we talk about these stories, it's so easy for, it's called the InterVarsity World Changers podcast. And so it's easy for us to put you, Smiley, in the driver's seat of the story and be like, man, you are changing the world. and that's sort of short form for what we really mean, which is, God is changing the world. This is God's project that he's going to do with or without you, Smiley.
Right, yes.
And so, like,
freedom.
So even if you make no movements on these things, like, God is going to do it. Yes. And the cool thing is that you get to do it with him. And, like, that just brings in, when we stop to think about it, when we stop to actually meditate on the reality of God's sovereignty, as you said, that he's going to accomplish his purposes no matter what. He will not be thwarted.
Right.
That we can sit back and say, like, man, these roadblocks, like, I'm sort of the go-between in all of this in some ways, but these are God's roadblocks to overcome, not mine. And I'm here doing the things that God gives me to do and not doing the things that he's not giving me to do.
Yes.
And like, yes, the peace that can give of deeply rooting ourselves in God's the one changing the world. I just get to be a part of it with him. And Jesus has full authority over all of these things. And I'm just going to watch him do this in his time.
Amen. Amen.
As you do these things, and you've already alluded to some of this, but as you look back on your time with InterVarsity, what are some of the formative threads that you see that have been a part of helping prepare you? And there's been more than just InterVarsity, but what are some of those formative threads that you've seen that have helped prepare you for these times that you're experiencing now?
So, I think that, and I think I mentioned it. Yeah, I alluded to it, but the love of God's word, just knowing how to, like, and I mean, it's like lessons of inductive Bible study. It's knowing how to study the Bible for myself. It gives me life. And it's like, now I when I can read the word, even at church, hearing a sermon and like, okay, here's the passage, and I can break it down while they're preaching. Like, I'm thinking about this word, and it's like the word is powerful, by itself, and so seeing that gives me life.
Yes.
So I think that's really important, that as I look back at my time in InterVarsity as a student and as a volunteer and as a staff, I think that's been my journey, just being able to show God's love, fall in love with God's word. And then I think that realizing that, and you just said it, that God is moving with or without me. I learned that from my time early on volunteering with InterVarsity right after college. I was actually starting a Bible study at Jackson State, and I didn't think that I was planting a ministry. I was just there. But during that time, I did have a lot of my, like, the thought of my answer, like, I'm going to go and save the day. I thought I had a superhero complex. Like, I'm going to go save the day on these campus. And so,
yes.
But the truth is, and so as I started, and I remember specifically when I was volunteering there, I was doing a weekly prayer. No one would show up. And so I did a Bible study and a prayer meeting, even though no one showed up. It was like Wednesday at noon. And I ended up taking like a sheet of paper and went out of it was in a meditation room. So I walked around and asked people for prayer requests, wrote it down, and prayed for them. And I did that every week. And
Nice.
So I was doing that out of a sense of obligation at first. And I was like, I got to have something to do. And I've really sensed God saying like you praying, but do you even know what you're praying about? Like, I was in the room praying. I'm like, what do you even know? Like, do you even know? I didn't go to school at that. I didn't know the campus, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know the people there. And so as I started doing that, I saw that God was there. Like, I met Jesus while he was doing, like, I saw him. He's like, hey, welcome. Like, welcome, as I'm already caring about these burdens. And that's the thing, is like, I'm praying for the prayers, not because he needs me to pray for them.
Right.
Like, I'm praying for the prayers so that he can show me what the eyes and the heart that he has for that campus. And that's what I learned. And so I'm like, okay, I want that. Give me your heart, Lord. Give me your heart for each person. And that's really what keeps me going. It's like, like, if I can see God's heart, and I think that's when I get blinded, is when I don't. When I'm blinded by my own ego or my own agenda, and I don't see God's heart, and I'm ignoring that he cares, because he cares.
Yeah.
And so when I'm reminded of that, that's when I'm more in focus. I think I answered your question. Yeah, there was a couple of factors in InterVarsity that helped me go.
Yes, a deep love for Scripture, rooted in Scripture, that has this outpouring of love for people.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Keeping eyes open and aware of what are the things that are happening in the lives of the people around me. How is God already moving in them, and what's my role in all of that?
Yeah.
And yes. Well, so then, thinking about other alumni who are listening to this story right now, alumni like you, Smiley, who are partnering with God, probably whether or not they realize it, are partnering with God in his world-changing work, or who are actively trying to figure out, like, how do I meet God in this context and partner with him in this? Is there a word of advice or encouragement that you would give to other alumni like you in those spaces?
Man, I think that if you're asking the questions like, how do I partner with God in what he's doing? And I mean, I think the question that I would ask is, what is God doing? And so it's like, that's really where I think when we know what God is already doing, becoming more aware of what God is already doing. So in your neighborhood, in your community, around you, I mean, that's where it's like, okay, how do I join in? I think that's really where that's the question that I would begin to ask. Because I think that even the story about the way that I was praying, it's like, you can pray in a vacuum, and that's fair. Like, that's God is sovereign. Like I told you, that's my answer. Like, so like, that is great. It is okay. And like, I think that the Lord knows that I believe in the Spirit that can intercede when we don't know what to say. So like, do that, But I also think that there's something powerful about getting getting into the midst of what's happening. So whether it's volunteering at a place, connecting with people to see what God is doing in the lives of people around you. And it could be in your, like around, I don't know if you're in your job or around, what you do, but like there, and hopefully you may be connected to a local nonprofit that does stuff. And that's the thing, is like, you don't have to start things on your own. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think that,
yes.
Good partners, and that's where it's like we do look for people that start things, do look for people that have skills and abilities that they can, volunteer and connect. So like, find some nonprofits locally that you can volunteer for and connect with and see what God is doing. Even if it's just a couple days, in a year, like it's like you're seeing what God is doing. And it's going to make a difference. And you might end up leaning somewhere that you can pour into a little bit deeper.
I really appreciate that because I think so often we can just get caught up in thinking like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? As opposed to just like, well, go look at what I'm already doing.
Yes.
And just like, and what fits either with the giftings that I've given to you or the discipleship conversations that I'm having with you right now, and just jump in. And that does feel like I love the leadership development that we do with InterVarsity, but sometimes I think we forget that we don't have to be the ones that start something. We don't have to be the ones that plant. Just like you said, you don't have to start a nonprofit. That's you. That's you.
Yeah.
Smiley, that's what you were invited to do, but maybe not the rest of us. Maybe the rest of us, or many of us, are invited to participate in what has been started. And I think that's a great word, because I think it frees us up a little bit to say, like, just look at what's already going on, and jump in.
And like I said earlier, you're not the superhero that's got to stop the world from being destroyed.
Yes. Oh, goodness. Yeah. So maybe just pick one. Pick one and really invest well in that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, man. Smiley, two last questions for you. One is, how can people stay connected with you and with the Andy Abrams Foundation? Yeah. And then last thing is, how can we be praying for you in the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So you can, stay connected. I think I try to stay active on my Instagram most of the time. Okay. So Smiley Jason _ is my Instagram handle, or you can look at me, smileyjason.com. I can link off my nonprofit is Andy Abrams Foundation.org. That's the website for that. So that's just ways you can follow me. And of course, if you want any of my books, Smiley Abrams on Amazon or my website, you can find any of my books there. And then as far as ways you can be praying, I think that, and I mentioned the challenge as a visionary, when the reality doesn't line up with my vision. I don't stop dreaming, but the challenge is I really need wisdom and strategy, because to me as a visionary, it's like if you ever bought somebody a Christmas present and the thought that you already bought the present and you wrapped it up. And so you're like, okay, in your mind, you're just excited about what they're going to do when they see it. It's like, okay, I know. And then you can, I don't know, for me, maybe you're not like this, but I know for me, I visualize what they're going to be like when they open it up. That's when I buy it. As soon as I see it, it's like I can see their face when they open it up in my mind. And that's kind of what it's like. It's like the anticipation of Christmas morning. For me, when my vision doesn't line up with my reality, it's like that. So there's a hope of anticipation, but there's also like this, like, when will Christmas, since you're a kid, like, when will Christmas come? And so that's part of what that is too. It's like that. So just pray for wisdom and strategy, just for me as a whole, like as I balance, being an area director, continue to build the ministries on campuses in the area, as well as develop this nonprofit. And then, of course, the renovation. Because, I don't know when the house will be done. But this is the direction that we're moving. And so I need wisdom on how to communicate that, how to continue to cast vision and invite people in.
Absolutely, man. We will make sure that all of those items make their way into the show notes so that people can reference them and easily engage and pray. And Smiley, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing this story, for continuing throughout the course of your story to point us towards God and be like, He's sovereign. He's the one that knows, and what it looks like to draw encouragement for the long haul from God, as He's the one that's changing the world. And thank you for the work that you're doing, the things that you've said yes. It is exciting to see alumni like you saying yes to Jesus and the ways that He's invited them to invited you to change the world with Him. So thanks a lot for sharing that with us.
Amen. Thank you. Definitely an honor.
Thanks for tuning in, alumni. Check the show notes for more information about today's guest and for ways that you could be praying for your fellow alum. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, take just a moment to share the episode with them, and then be sure to leave us a rating and a review as well. Now go change that world, alumni. Thanks for listening to InterVarsity World Changers. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Santera, and our theme song is Crazy by InterVarsity alumnus Andy Minio.